قل هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة أنا ومن اتبعني وسبحان الله وما أنا من المشركين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد, dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to this new episode of Ask Zad. Our first question for tonight is from Sania. Sania says, before making dua in salah, should we praise Allah and send salutations upon the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam? First of all, it is important to know that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam told us that all dua are blocked between the heavens and the earth until a person offers salutation upon me. So the Prophet is highlighting the importance of offering salutation upon the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam before making dua. This made some people believe that every time we make dua, we have to offer salutation upon the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. However, if you observe the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the way he used to make dua, you'd find that there are two types of dua. A dua that is prescribed, that the Prophet told us to say it, and it does not contain praising Allah or offering salutation upon the Prophet ﷺ. And there is dua that is general, that the Prophet told us, make dua here or there. And he did not specify a particular dua. The first type of dua, such as Sayyidul Istighfar, the master of seeking forgiveness, the best dua for seeking forgiveness. And it begins by, Allahumma anta rabbi wa ana abduk. So there is no praising of Allah, and there is no offering salutation of the Prophet ﷺ. Maybe one would say, Allahumma anta rabbi is a form of praising Allah Azza wa Jal. It's possible, but there is definitely no salutation upon the Prophet ﷺ. The dua we say when we wake up for tahajjud prayer in the middle of the night. اللهم لك الحمد أنت قيم السماوات والأرض ومن فيهن ولك الحمد أنت نور السماوات والأرض ومن فيهن ولك الحمد أنت الحق وقولك. All of this is praising Allah. Offering salutation upon the Prophet is not mentioned here, alayhi salatu wasalam. So we understand that the prescribed dua is to be recited without praising Allah and offering salutation upon the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. As for general dua, such as between adhan and iqamah, the adhan is over, I said the adhkar, and the iqamah is in 10 minutes. I raise my hands. I'd like to ask Allah for anything. I praise Allah and I offer salutation upon the Prophet ﷺ. There's no problem in that, none whatsoever. Now, in the last third of the night, the same thing. When it rains, the same thing, etc. When I'm breaking my fast, there's no problem in that. Now the issue is, what about if a person is in prayer? And we know that there are two places in prayer that are highly recommended for us to make dua in. The first is in sujood, whether this is a fard prayer or a nafil prayer, whether this is the first, second sujood or the last sujood. You are encouraged to make dua, because the Prophet said, alayhi salam, the closest one of you is to Allah is when he's in the prostration position. So choose whatever dua you want because you'll be answered. And the second place is after the tashahhud and the salat upon the Prophet ﷺ in the last rak'ah. So I'm sitting down for the last tashahhud, the last sitting. I offer the salutation upon the Prophet ﷺ. Before I complete my prayer and conclude it with salam, it is recommended that I make dua. And this is something also the Prophet ﷺ had directed us to say. Here, it was never reported that you praise Allah and you offer salutation upon the Prophet ﷺ. And therefore, you go directly to your dua. And you say, Subhana Rabbil A'la in sujood, Subhana Rabbil A'la wa bihamdih, for example, and then you go, Oh Allah, pay off my debts. Oh Allah, increase my provision. Oh Allah, guide my children. Oh Allah, make my daughter successful in her exams. Oh Allah, cure my sick people, etc. There's no problem in doing that. The problem would arise if you think that I have to. No, you don't have to. So offering salutation upon the Prophet ﷺ while in the sujood, is it permissible? It's a dua. There's no problem if you say Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad while in the sujood. But it is not part of the sunnah. So it is not something that is recommended for you to do, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Abdul Razzaq says, what is the significance of the number 786 in Islam? People say 786 means Bismillah or Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. To know something, whether it is related to Islam or not, we have to go to the basics. We have to go back to the Quran and the Sunnah. What made Islam exist as it was revealed and as it began 15 centuries ago? Almost 1440 years. Islam has been on the same pace, and Muslims have been practicing the same rituals. Why? All religions would remain maximum couple of hundred years and fade away. Look at other religions. Nothing is as it used to be practiced, except Islam. What gives Islam the momentum? What preserves the practices and the rituals of Islam? The answer is very easy. Whatever was revealed and given at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, this is called Islam. Anything added or taken out would be not from Islam. Meaning, Allah says in chapter 5, Surah Al-Ma'idah, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. Today, I have completed your religion and made my favor upon you complete, and I accepted Islam to be your religion. So the religion was completed at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Anyone wanting to add or subtract from it must bring evidence. So at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, his companions, his tabi'een, the tabi'in, did anyone give any importance to the figure 786? The answer is no. Nobody ever paid attention to it. So what is 786? This is something that came up maybe 100, maybe 200 years ago, maybe less, maybe even 3-4 decades. It was initiated most likely by people who thought, because Satan messed up their minds big time. They thought that numbers had a secret in the Quran, in the Islam. So they started finding that there are significance of a particular set of numbers here or there as a coincidence or as a test from Allah, and they wanted to cascade this over the whole religion so that it would be perfect in their sight, not knowing that this is what Satan is best in. So he messed up with their minds and convinced them to mess up other people's minds as well. So they gave preference, they gave importance to the figure 21. And the Qadianis and all these deviant cults that are not related to Islam, the Baha'is, I think, it's not the Qadianis, but all of them are out of the fold of Islam, place great importance on the figure 21. So they fast 21 days instead of fasting Ramadan. And they have importance of the number 21 and the multiplication of the number 21. And they say that this has to do with that. And all of this is total nonsense, total bogus, not related to Islam or any other religion. But the tendency in the hearts of people of ignorance is to look for something that is unique, something that is rare, so that I would be holding the torch while everyone else is looking up to me and say, wow, they came up with something new. Not knowing that whoever brings such innovative things in Islam, it is rejected, and Allah would not accept that from them. Mother Aisha says, may Allah be pleased with her, the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, whoever innovates in our religion what is not part of it, it is rejected. And this is part of the rejection. Having said that, there are people who may make some correct observations out of their good intention to Islam, but cascade this to other areas which are wrong. So you may find people who are righteous, Muslims, and they come with a conclusion or an observation which might be true about a particular number of things in the Quran. And then they want to cascade this to everything. So for example, they say if you look at the Quran, it mentions the word day 365 times. So it is equivalent to the number of days in the year, or 360 days, I don't know. Who's counting? And if you look at the number of this or the number of that, you will find the month is mentioned 12 times, etc. Some might be true, but if you follow the pattern, as scholars did, they would come to find that 90% of what they're saying is not authentic. But again, this is shaitan, showing them that this is part of the miracles of the Quran, blah, 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 which is not. Quran is not a book of science. It is a book that is miraculous, that is challenging, that has a lot of miracles in it. But it is not a book of geology or a book of physics or mathematics. It is something just to give you hints of its miraculous nature. So going back to the issue of numbers, one must stay away from these things because they are more confusing rather than being facts. A sister says, what dua must a girl recite to be safe from rapists? There isn't any specific dua for this cause. And I understand that the issue of rape is quite, unfortunately, common in some un-Islamic countries. especially in the subcontinent and elsewhere. And Islam has the answer to all of this. There isn't a specific dua for this, but there are du'as in adhkar, the evening and the morning, that we say, that we seek Allah's protection through, and Allah would protect us with His grace, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and mercy. But Islam gives you the solution for rape. We see that a woman was raped in this country or that, and was maimed, maybe tortured, maybe burnt alive, and then she died, and the court takes long proceedings for years and maybe would acquit the convicts for one reason or the other. This encourages people to commit such a heinous crime, alongside the fact that Islam orders women to be protective. They should wear the hijab, the proper hijab. And when a woman wears a proper hijab, most likely perpetrators would not look at her as an easy prey. Rather, they would look at someone who's flashing herself and putting ads, look at me. Now, I'm not justifying, but I'm saying that Islam protects women from such attacks. So if a woman is abiding by the hijab, if a woman wants to be protected from such a heinous crime, she's ordered not to go to dubious places, not to go in dark alleys, not to go alone, especially in an environment or in an area where she knows that she is vulnerable and not immune against such attacks. So Islam puts barriers. Islam encourages Muslims to come to the defense of such a woman if she were to be attacked. And we cannot just stand by watching what's happening or turn a blind eye and look the other way. Muslims have to enjoin goodness and virtue, and prohibit and prevent vice and evil. This is part of our religion. So, sister, in a nutshell, there isn't any specific dua to be said to be protected, but there are ways of protecting yourself. And secondly, you have to trust Allah Azza wa Jal. Fear can be negative and it can be positive. Fear is negative when it prevents you from progressing. So the fear of being raped, if it prevents you from mobilizing, from moving, from going out totally to legitimate things in broad daylight, this fear is negative. Yes, you can visit your family, you can go shopping, you can visit friends and do normal things like normal people. But if this fear cripples you and stops you from going out for legitimate things, then you have got a problem. Now, having said that, you must also be aware that fear can be positive. So a woman or a sister who fears being raped, she takes the necessary means and trusts Allah and go ahead. So she is decent in her clothes, she doesn't apply perfume, she wears the proper hijab, she doesn't go into dubious places or places that are dark or the possibility of being mugged are greater than others. She's usually accompanied by other women or a man to be with her, a mahram. etc., if she is in an area that infested by such crimes, and Allah knows best. May Allah protect all of us from such fitna. Suha says, what are the Islamic benefits of cupping? And what are the days when it is recommended and prohibited to do cupping? Cupping is part of the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. He recommended it, and he told us in an authentic hadith that if cure was in anything, it is in one of three. Either a taste of honey, or a slash of a cupper, a person who's doing the cupping, or by cauterization. What is cupping? Cupping is extracting blood from the body, from certain areas, generally speaking, at the back of the head and neck. These are the areas most likely that cuppers use to suck the blood out. Before, in the beginning, they used to use a razor, cut slashes, and place a mug or a special device, and then suck the blood out. The nature of the blood is different than the normal blood you get from a wound or from an artery. And this blood is usually dark, very, very thick, and people are relieved afterwards. It is beneficial for those who have migraines, high blood pressure. It's good for the eyesight. So many benefits of it, not only in Islam, even in nations before Islam. It was known. And the Prophet himself, ﷺ, performed cupping. He asked someone to perform cupping to him and gave him 1 full dinar, which is a lot of money. Now, cupping is part of the sunnah, especially for healing and curing. But is it permissible to do all the times, or there are certain times? It's an issue of dispute among scholars. And Imam Malik, Imam Yahya ibn Ma'in, and great imams of hadith, they say that all the hadiths regarding the timings of cupping and naming of the dates are not authentic. And the vast majority of scholars say that according to medical reports, cupping on the 17th, 19th, or the 21st of the lunar month is more beneficial than any other days of the month. And Ibn al-Qayyim spoke about the benefits of it after having the full moon, etc. These are things that medical doctors support, and there are hadiths, though weak, yet the Salaf used to implement them. Now, Imam Malik says nothing is authentic in regards to the dates to make or not to make cupping. And he says there isn't any day that I have not made cupping in. So Imam Malik says it's all open. Imam Ahmad, as we know from his school of thought, that whenever there isn't any sound hadith backing it up, he would take weak hadith and implement it rather than implementing self-reasoning. Like the school of Abu Hanifa, for example. He would say that, no, weak hadith is better for me than the sayings of Ibrahim al-Nakha'i or Sufyan al-Thawri or Tom, Dick or Harry. And he used to dislike cupping on Saturdays and Wednesdays. But again, it is not authentic, though Imam Tirmidhi authenticated some of it, Sheikh Al-Albani authenticated some of it, but the general trend among the predecessors of scholars, of imams of hadith, that all of this is not authentic, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. So it is best to limit your cupping to 17th, 19th, and 21st. And if you can avoid Saturdays and Wednesdays, that would be great. If not, there's no problem. Having said this, this is related to cupping, which is a form of ibadah. There's no medical reason for that. If you have a medical reason for cupping, there is no problem at all among scholars to do it any time of the day or any time of the night, any day of the week, any day of the month. There's no problem in that, none whatsoever. We have a short break. Stay tuned, and inshallah, we'll be right back.
Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I'm going to talk about the book Interactions of the Greatest Leader. Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no one's wealth helped me as much as the wealth of Abu Bakr helped me. After which Abu Bakr began to weep and say, and is my life and wealth for anything besides you, O Messenger of Allah? This narration shows the level of etiquette and humbleness that Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, had in the presence of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For he likened himself to a slave of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam by saying that his wealth was only for the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as well as his soul and self. This comes as no surprise, for the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has more right on the believers than themselves. He, may Allah be pleased with him, spent his wealth in the cause of Allah, and he consoled the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam through his own self. So the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam recognized that for him and said, in order to build his stature and to remind the ummah of his virtues, no one's wealth helped me as much as the wealth of Abu Bakr helped me. Among the benefits of this narration, it is important to keep good manners and humbleness in the presence of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Thanking someone who has bestowed some favor on you, as well as supplicating for them, is part of having good manners. Reported by Al-Bukhari, reported by Al-Tirmidhi, and Ibn Majah. Albani ruled it authentic in his book Sahih Al-Jami', the explanation of As-Sindi on the book of Ibn Majah, and At-Taysir Bisharh Al-Jami' As-Saghir.
Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome back. Muhammad says, does laughing nullify our prayers? What about smiling during prayer? The consensus of scholars is that laughing nullifies a person's prayer. It's like speaking. So when a person is laughing and he's shaking his shoulders or uttering a sound, anyone looking at him would not say that he's praying, because this goes totally against prayer. What kind of prayer is this when you are laughing and breaking in laughter? So the consensus of scholars that this prayer is invalid. Now, smiling is a different issue. And smiling is an expression on the face. It's like frowning. It's like an expression that comes due to the pain you're having in your stomach. It's an expression. But this does not impact your prayer in terms of validity. So it is valid, without any problem, inshallah. However, it is not something that is productive. It reduces your reward the more you do it, because definitely it impacts your khushu'. So when a person smiles, then this negatively impacts his prayer in reducing the amount of reward he's getting. And I'm talking about normal people, because I've seen people who have problems in their lives that during prayer, if you look at them, they're always doing this, smiling excessively, to the extent that you're afraid, is this a serial killer or what? Is a clown? Why is he doing this? And you keep on looking at them while they're praying, but they can't help it. And if you tell them, he says, I know, but I don't know why. I just simply can't control the reflexes on my face. And this is, may Allah protect us and save us, is different. This person is doing it because it's out of his control. This is different from someone who's praying and then he looks at the children in front of him and he smiles because they did something funny. You shouldn't have looked at the first place. And even if it took place in front of you, if you were realizing who you are standing in front of and the Jannah and the Nar are waiting for you, you wouldn't have smiled. You would have thought differently, because prayer is something that is different altogether from your normal day-to-day activities. Afra says, my question is regarding making up for prayers. I work at night from 11 to 7 a.m., from 11 p.m. till 7 a.m. And by the time I wake up at 5 p.m., I miss Dhuhr, Asr, and Maghrib prayer. How do I make up for these prayers? Should I pray them immediately when I wake up, one prayer at a time, or do I pray them as I normally would, just 3 prayers in a row after completing each one? So, first of all, Afra, your name tells me that you are a woman. And for a woman to work night shift, or they call it the graveyard shift, is inappropriate. This endangers your safety, your health, and your marriage if you are married. It's not normal for a woman to spend the night outside, even if it was for work. Now, I'm speaking in general terms. A woman should not work outside at that time, let alone work in a mixed environment, let alone it's unsafe for her to commute or travel from her home to the workplace, etc. But this is something you have to consider and to think about. As far as sleeping, if you finish work at 7 a.m., by the time you reach home, it's 8 o'clock, maybe have breakfast, and go to sleep. You are one of two persons. Either you are totally dead, and you set the alarm, you ask people in the house to wake you up for Dhuhr, for Asr, and for Maghrib, and there's no use. You're totally dead. You don't hear anything. You're disconnected from the whole world. In this case, Allah does not hold you accountable, because as mentioned in the hadith, Allah has uplifted the pen of accountability upon 3, among them the person who's asleep until he wakes up. You're unconscious. People try to wake you up, you set 2-3 alarms and it does not work. because you're dead tired, then there is no accountability upon you. What to do? The moment you wake up, which is 5 o'clock p.m., you have to pray Dhuhr 4 rak'ahs, Asr 4 rak'ahs, Maghrib 3 rak'ahs immediately. You do not, as some people do, postpone Dhuhr for next day's Dhuhr, pray them together, double, 4 rak'ah, and Asr the same, and Maghrib the same. No, you must immediately pray them in sequence. Dhuhr, then Asr, then Maghrib. But if you are from the second category, which is you can wake up, and people can wake you up easily, and you can wake up if you set the alarm, but you don't. In this case, you should not pray neither Dhuhr, Asr, nor Maghrib if Isha prayer was called, because you deliberately skipped the prayer. You intentionally skipped the prayer, and it was premeditated that you go to sleep and not wake up until it's 5 o'clock, which is a serious, major sin. So I hope this answers your question. Ziba says, there's a fitness club only for ladies in my city, but there are no gym equipment. They follow only workouts like Zumba, aerobics, etc. Is it permissible to join these workouts? Well, Ziba, you know that such fitness places include a lot of sins, and Muslims must not be involved in such sins. So, for example, such aerobics and Zumba classes must be conducted with music. It is impossible to do them without music. If you tell me that, yes, this fitness center does aerobics without music, it's just exercises, no problem in that. Secondly, the issue of women wearing inappropriate clothes. And this, you are going with your own feet to it. So, going and subscribing and having a membership and joining their classes when they're wearing only, for example, yoga clothes or leggings or shorts or things that reveal their awrah, even if it were among women themselves, it's still prohibited. And if the exercise movements are so seductive and may provoke fitna, lust and desire among women themselves, then this becomes even worse and worse. So at the end of the day, all what we have in this world is our hearts. We cannot tarnish our own hearts with our own hands. We have to select the places we go to ensure that our hearts remain pure, because Allah Azza wa Jal does not look at our bodies and does not look at our wealth. Rather, He looks at our hearts and our deeds. So if my heart is corrupt, it's filled with fitna, it's filled with lusts and desires, it's filled with doubts, Allah Azza wa Jal abhors such a heart. Allah does not love such a person. So by going to these places, you will probably face a lot of fitna, and it's totally inappropriate for you to go and join them, and Allah knows best. Kawthar or Kawsar says, can a person have any special status if they're buried in Jannatul Mu'alla or Mu'la or Jannatul Baqi'? Why do we call Jannatul Mu'la and Jannatul Baqi'? Any reason behind this? Any speciality of these two cemeteries when compared to other cemeteries? Of course, these two cemeteries, one is in Mecca and one is in Medina. And is there any reward for being buried there? The answer is, generally speaking, no. However, all scholars say that being buried in a place where other righteous people are buried is a plus. So Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, Sa'id ibn Zayd, may Allah be pleased with them, and they're both one of the 10 heaven bound. When they died in Al-Aqiq, which is outskirts of Medina, close, but it's not part of Medina itself, they were buried in Al-Baqi'. They requested that their bodies are moved and buried in Al-Baqi' rather than being in Al-Aqiq outside of Medina. So scholars say that whenever a person is buried in a cemetery where there are righteous people, then his chances of receiving dua from people passing by, from righteous people coming to visit, is far greater than if he was buried elsewhere. And this is why Muslims cannot be buried in cemeteries of non-Muslims. It is totally prohibited for a Muslim to be buried in a cemetery of non-Muslims. All Muslims must be buried in their own cemeteries. Non-Muslims cannot be buried with them, and they cannot be buried with others. It's something that has to be exclusive. Now, having said that, it is not permissible to travel from one city to the other in order to bury someone, because there is a lot of hardship in it, and it's not part of the Sunnah. It's delaying the burial for no legitimate reason. And a lot of the Muslims think that if they were to be buried in Medina or in Mecca, that is of greater reward, and this is not true. The Prophet said in an authentic hadith, alayhi salatu, whoever is able to be buried, or to be, let me rephrase that, whoever is able to die in Medina, he should do so. Now, your death is not in your hand, so how can I die in Medina? This is an indication that living in Medina till you die is highly recommended and rewardable. So the dying process in Medina would get you the intercession of the Prophet ﷺ, would get you highly rewarded for that. But to die elsewhere and to fly you to Medina, or to drive you to Medina, to drive the deceased corpse to Medina, this is not part of the Sunnah. There's great hardship upon the family of the deceased, and there's no reward in it, none whatsoever that is mentioned in the Quran or in the Sunnah. So, in a nutshell, being buried there is not of great reward. Those scholars say that the more righteous people are around you, the better it is for the person buried there. If you are in Mecca itself and you select to be buried in Al-Ma'la, then this is okay, no problem. If you are in Medina and you request that you are buried in Al-Baqi', then this is fine. Why is it called Jannatu Al-Ma'la or Al-Baqi'? I have no idea. This is only found in the subcontinent. The Arabs, the Muslims here, they've never mentioned any such a word with the graveyard or with the cemetery like is mentioned here, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Sudayf says, what is the ruling on Qawali, and is it permissible in Islam? Qawali, after researching the word, is stemmed from qawl, and the Arabic word qawl is a statement or what you say. And qawali or qawali, if you go back to look for the meaning, it says that it is a Sufi thing, such as na'at or poetry, accompanied by music. And it is famous in the subcontinent greatly, and more likely to be in the Punjab and the Sindh regions of Pakistan and elsewhere, in India and Bangladesh and all these countries. It is a Sufi concept of poetry accompanied with music. Whether it is praising the Prophet ﷺ or praising anything else, this is beside the point. The concept of having such poetry with music is totally prohibited. Music is totally prohibited and out of the question. If it has poetry that are involving haram, that has shirk in it by praising the Prophet ﷺ and elevating his status to be a god, then this is shirk and it's totally prohibited as well. Hina says, after divorce, who gets the custody of children? If mother gets it, must the daughters be returned to their father after they reach puberty because of wali issues for marriage? This is an issue of dispute among scholars. In regards to the general concept that governs this, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is crystal clear. The mother, after divorce, is worthy and is given the priority of custody of her children unless she gets married. Scholars say that if the boy reaches a certain age, whether 7, 9 or whatever, he's given the choice to choose between his mom and dad. But in the beginning, before that, he's with his mother. And his father is obliged to provide for him the shelter, the food, the medication, the education, the whole 9 yards. And when the girl is 9 years old or 7 years old, some scholars, like in the school of thought of Ahmed, says that she's given to her father because she is his honor and he cares and protects her more than anyone else. Anything that tarnishes her reputation tarnishes his reputation. Unlike boys and men, they can go around and play without anyone talking negative about them, but girls and females are different. The other schools of thought say no, the same ruling applies. She should stay with her mother because her mother would be able to teach her about purification, menses, etc., until she is married or until different ages depending on the schools of thought. But the most authentic opinion is that the custody is awarded to the one who takes care of the child. So yes, by default, a 2-year or 3-year-old must be given to his mom until she remarries. If she doesn't, she keeps him. But if she's not taking care of him, if she's a bad woman or flirting with other men, not praying, not educating him, not teaching him or her how to pray, not feeding him properly, in this case, the child is taken away from her and giving to his father in order for him to take care of. And likewise, if the father had the custody of the boy, but he's not taking care of him or not providing for him, he is taken and given to the mother. Once the boy reaches puberty, then the custody is no longer existing. He chooses to live with either one, or he can move out and live alone. He's a boy, he's a man. As for the girl, she cannot live separately. She must be forced to live with her parents. And this is the Islamic ruling. So at the end of the day, it is up to the Muslim judge. He's the one authorized to look at which is the best for the child. So for example, if we have a couple who got a divorce and the mother wants to live in Europe or elsewhere, while the father is living in a Muslim country, the judge awards the custody to the man, to the husband, to the father, because the well-being of the child is to be in a Muslim country and not to go to a kafir country and live there, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Sajid says, is there any reward on cutting nails on Friday? Is it sunnah to cut nails on Friday? The answer is no. It is not part of the sunnah to select Friday to do the acts of fitrah, which are shaving the pubic hair, plucking the armpit hair, trimming the mustache, clipping the nails. All of these are part of the sunnah of fitrah, which the Prophet ﷺ highlighted and told us that this is recommended to do. Now, some people always do this before Friday prayer, especially when they're doing their ghusl, ritual bath for the Jum'ah, for the Friday prayer. So they associate these acts with it. Associating these acts with it is no problem. But thinking that this is a sunnah, and if you missed it, oh, if you've done a grave mistake and this is a big thing, no, this is totally not true. So if you do it just because it's a habit and not related to Friday, there's no problem in that, insha'Allah, and Allah knows best. And the final question for today is from Sonia. She says, is it permissible to register yourself in matrimonial websites? What if it's a must to submit our photographs there? It is not permissible at all to submit your photograph, whether it is to matrimonial websites or like so many people do. The parents send their daughter's photograph to potential suitors, and it's being spread all over, and you can find it on the web as well. This is totally prohibited. This defies the purpose of hijab. If there is an Islamic matrimonial website that takes your biodata and your wali, your guardian contact number, and it talks about you, there's no problem in that, insha'Allah, but it must not have any photographs of you, and there should not be any direct contact with any potential suitor. The contact must be through your guardian, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. This is all we have time for, and until we meet next time, I leave you fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
قل هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة أنا ومن اتبعني وسبحان الله وما أنا من المشركين.